So ultimately, how do we find like where we should be at with these calories? So we understand that, if we want to lose weight, we need to be in some sort of deficit. If we want to just maintain, we need to just eat at roughly calorie maintenance. And if we want to gain, we need to consume a slight surplus of calories, whether again, that's through eating more or moving less, or a combination of the two, right? So how do we find this number? This is the thing that people kind of get really caught up on. And ultimately, it depends on where you're at, right? You could, and this is what most people do, they go, oh yeah, I'm going to start tracking calories, right? And they'll enter in, whatever their body composition metrics, their, anthropometry, and they'll enter it into some calculator they find online. Or maybe they download MyFitnessPal and they just enter in the data into the equation that MyFitnessPal, gives you, right? And ultimately, that is one way to work out where your calories are at, where like you should be at with the diet based on your goals. Now, most people, it's a shock when they first do it, right? And that's either from the perspective of, all of a sudden they look at a number and they're like, Jesus, I didn't know that I should be consuming 2,000 calories. Or they look at that number and they set like the weight loss targets that they have way too aggressive. Like they're like, I want to be losing like 5 kilos per week, right? Because they don't have that kind of, what would you call it? An accurate idea of how fast this stuff should go, right? So a lot of people get shocked by that. I actually don't think that is the best method, right? Using some sort of calculator. It is definitely one method and it's definitely helpful. However, what we generally advocate, and we do it with a lot of our clients as we are onboarding them, is we get them to track what they're already doing, right? Like, what does your diet look like now? Let's just get you to track for a few days so that you can see, oh, this is what I'm consuming. This is how much I'm consuming. This is where it comes out at with the calories. The issue with this is most people do struggle with accurately portraying what they actually eat and not changing that, right? Because, if you start tracking things, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't want to, eat the Oreos that I have over there because I don't want to have to count that. So all of a sudden you stop eating the snacks. You automatically or subconsciously cut down on the extra calories you're consuming, right? So that is one issue with that, but we can still account for that. We can start being like, oh, how is this the diet that you've recorded? How is that in relation to what you were previously doing? Oh, you were eating a little bit more here, blah, blah, blah. And we can kind of get an idea, right? Then we also want to track body weight. We want to see where that is trending, how that is moving, how that is being influenced by the diet that we're consuming. Like if you're saying, this is the way I've always been eating, and we track your body weight, and at the start of the week, you're 87 kilos, and then at the end of the week, you're 83 kilos, we know that there's some mismatch here. Something happened here where you're actually probably now in a deficit, even though you're saying, this is how I'm normally eating. Now, that can happen a variety of ways. Some people can be like, oh yeah, my Monday to Friday, this is perfect. And then all of a sudden on Saturday and Sunday, they are in this super mega huge surplus. They're in 20,000 calories on Saturday, 15,000 calories on Sunday, so we have to look at a broader time scale. But if you track calories, track body weight for 2 weeks, you should have a fairly good idea in terms of where your calories should be at, right? If you're trying to lose weight, we want to be at a deficit. So if you find you are losing weight at the calorie level that you're at, you are in a deficit. If you find you're maintaining your weight, great, you found maintenance. If you found that you're slowly gaining weight, cool, you found what a surplus is for you, right? So that's the first thing we want to do. I always call it the average and adjust method, right? Because what we have there is we find out the average, we find out what happened, what we were eating, we found out what that did with our body, and then we adjust from there. The other variable that you can track is, as well as that, is our overall like energy expenditure. Now, this is a little bit harder to track, but there are ways to do it. Like say, for example, if you have something like an Apple Watch or a fitness tracking watch, they will give you some sort of number in terms of the calories that you burned throughout that day. It actually doesn't matter how accurate that actually is. We just want to get an idea of where that number is at, right? You can also do something like tracking the number of steps that you've taken per day. And that is kind of a proxy method, or a proxy measure, I should say, for, we'll call it this non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is all the kind of non-exercise stuff that you do throughout the day. Like we were saying, like fidgeting, different things like that, right? It gives us a little bit of a proxy for that number, right? So we have a number of variables that we can track. We can track calories that we're consuming in terms of the food that we're eating. We can track how that affects our body weight. And then we can also track, the calorie expenditure throughout the day, either through, again, a fitness tracking watch or something, or the number of steps that we're doing per day. All of that information taken together should give you a relatively good idea of where your calories should be at for your given goal. So Gary, before we move on from that, do you have anything to say on that, calorie side of things?
No, I think that covers most of what's required there, really. Obviously, there's some more nuances in terms of how you change things over time, metabolic adaptation, etc. But I think that covers the basics.
Yeah, and see, this is the thing. Again, like, we're not going to be able to cover absolutely everything. We've done more in-depth podcasts, and series on this stuff, series on this stuff. So again, you can always go back and listen to the other podcast series on this stuff. But for now, you have a pretty good idea of where calories should be at and how to find that rough number, right? You also have an idea of how to adjust that. If we want to lose weight, or start trending the body weight downwards, we want to eat at a calorie deficit. Now, again, we can go into the magnitude of that deficit. Generally, we recommend a slower, steadier rate and really focus on food habits, but maybe you want to be more aggressive with things, and that's okay, right? And for most people, I would probably stay away from anything more than like a 500 calorie deficit per day. While shorter periods of time, it can be fine to do that. For most people, it's probably not going to be the most effective way to set up their diet, because what always happens, and it's kind of what I always alluded to, people will eat 1,000 calorie deficit Monday to Friday and be really restricted. And all of a sudden come Saturday, they're like, you know what? Fuck this shit. And then it's, floodgates are open. I'll start again on Monday. And that's unfortunately the way it happens. So you start with a lower, calorie deficit, 250 calories less than what you think your maintenance is at. And all of a sudden it's actually much easier to stick to that long term, because we have to remember this stuff is consistent. This stuff is over time. We have to look at it at a longer time horizon than just, what did I do this day? Because that is, again, something that people will often do. They'll be like, oh, my diet is so good. And you look at their diet and you're like, Jesus, your diet is really good. But you realize that they're doing this Monday to Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are, way off track with this stuff, right? So we have to look at it over a longer period of time, right? So calories, you understand them.